Reading a book. A long-lost letter, posted 20 years earlier, finally finds its way to the woman it was meant for. Inside is a confession, a clue, and a promise that was never kept. Following the letter's quiet breadcrumbs, she untangles what really happened and how to go on living with what cannot be fixed. Maya K. No apartment number, no street. Just her name and a city. Somehow it had found her. She turned it over in her hands. Across the seal, under the flap, the glue had darkened in a way old glue does. On the back was a metal-stamped mark, a postal plant code, a station letter, a crooked outline of a bird. The postmark near the stamp was a blur of circles and numbers, like a memory with an erased center. "Cool stamp," said Theo, the mail carrier, currently leaning on the lobby table like a man claiming a stage. He was new to her building, friendly, with the careful humor of someone who works at the front door of strangers' lives. "Vintage rate. Someone raided a desk drawer that hadn't been opened since dial-up internet." "It's for me," she said, stupidly, as if needing to state it out loud to anchor it to the present. "You're Maya? It's been bouncing around," he said. "Redirection labels, old forwarding addresses, dead letter office stuff. A minor miracle, really." "Where did it wait?" she asked. He tapped the corner of the envelope with a fingertip. "There's a station code that doesn't exist anymore. Warehouse became a gym. I heard they closed the last of the old sorting machines this spring. Sometimes a bag hides in a wall and gets discovered when someone with a sledgehammer who wants more light." He smiled a little. "Open it. Don't let me be the only one who's curious." She didn't open it there. She took it upstairs, past the plant that refused to die and the painting she liked to dislike. Her hands remembered, before her mind did, how to slide a butter knife under old paper. She was suddenly 13 again, nosy and reverent in equal measure. She sat at the kitchen table and breathed in. The envelope had the faintest smell of cold dust and library glue. Inside was a letter on lined paper, written in careful, determined handwriting, the kind that pretends to be neat and becomes neat by effort. There was also a pressed ginkgo leaf, pale gold gone green with time, its fan cracked into delicate threads. She unfolded the paper. "Hi, Mouse," it began. No one had called her that in 20 years. Only one person had done it in the first place. "I don't know if this will reach you. The post office says it will. I'm writing it anyway because I promised you I would. I promised I'd explain myself in a letter in case voice fails me. If you're reading this, it means the letter won the race." Maya felt her heart raise a hand, then a second hand, like a student about to be called on. "I need you to know two things before anything else. I didn't leave because of you. I left because the truth I owed you was heavier than the lie I could carry. I have done one good thing and one bad thing. The good thing is yours. The bad thing is mine." She set the page down, just for a breath. Outside, a delivery truck decided it was a dragon. Across the alley, a window closed with the sigh of old paint. Inside, she was standing in a kitchen from another year, listening to a man rinse a coffee mug as if it were a confession. She read on. "If you go to the back steps of the old municipal library, the one with the ginkgo trees, and count 7 stones from the railing, you'll see a small chip on the 8th. We made that chip together by accident, remember? You laughed because we got away with it. If you reach under that stone, there's a tin. It's not large, there's a cassette inside. If nobody has found it by the time you read this, that will be a miracle. If it's gone, fine. The miracle can be you reading this anyway. I'll be at the Orange Clock until Tuesday. If I'm not there, it means I became a coward or a consequence. Don't come looking for me. But if you do, take this leaf. It will know the way better than I do. R." The letter did not say Dad. it didn't have to. She said the letter out loud, or parts of it, without realizing. The kitchen decided it could use the sound. It took her a minute to understand that the date at the top, faint, a light pencil, and the style of the stamp, and the reference to a cassette and the young man's practiced penmanship all agree that the letter had set out a very long time ago. The orange clock, the library steps, the tin, the cassette, Tuesday. R. She folded the letter carefully. The ginkgo leaf trembled in her fingers, a fossil of a day that had known wind. She didn't know whether to cry or to put her shoes on first. She put her shoes on.
The old library on 3rd hadn't been a library for a while. It was a space with booths and power outlets now, a place for people to touch laptops and talk loudly about quiet work. The front still had columns that pretended to be older than they were. The back still had steps down to the alley and the small garden with the 2 ginkgo trees that rained fans for a few weeks each year and then forgot they had ever done so. When Maya arrived, the leaves on the ground were last year's, thin as breath. The rail was still there, the stone steps still a little uneven. She counted like someone counting cotton stitches. 7 stones. On the 8th, just before the corner, there was a crescent-shaped chip, hardly more than a scratch. She saw her younger self and another pair of smaller hands, the way they had pretended the corner of a hardcover was a shovel, and giggled when the librarian coughed meaningfully toward propriety. "Excuse me," said a voice behind her. "Are you measuring the stairs?" She turned. A woman in a black apron stood at the back door, holding a tray with mugs that claimed to be coffee. She had curious eyes, the good kind, the ones that recognize a story when it walks in on its own feet. "I'm looking for a bad idea I hid 2 decades ago," Maya said, before deciding not to be embarrassed by the absurdity. "Those are the best kind. We find them constantly under benches," the woman said. She set the tray down and crouched beside Maya. "Which stone?" Maya showed her. Together, they reached underneath, into the dark, their fingers feeling the rough shape of neglect. There was nothing there, just cool grit and a blunt nail-clipping of mortar. "I figured," Maya said, more surprised by her own calm than by the absence. "Thank you for indulging me." "Look at you being sensible about it," the woman said, half amused, half impressed. "My name's Alma. If it helps the story, a few years ago, when they made this into a co-working thing, they lifted a lot of the stones to fix the drainage. I know because my heel got stuck in the temporary path and I was rude about it. They could have found anything under there. You might ask the building manager if anything personal turned up." "Do you know who that is?" "Office down the hall. Glass door with the plant that looks like it wants to quit." "Oh?" Alma hesitated. "Do you want coffee? You're shaking a little in your voice." "I'm fine." Lied, but thank you." "Okay. If your bad idea turns good, you owe me a very interesting update." Maya went inside. The lobby was a contrast of old wood and new air conditioning. The glass door was right where Alma had said. A floppy plant threatened to pour itself onto the carpet. Inside, a man in a sweater with opinions regarded her over the rim of a mug. "Can I help you?" he said. "I'm looking for something that might have been found under the back steps during renovation. A small metal tin, cassette tape, 20 years late." He took this in with the polite attention of a person dealing with someone else's long story while his short story was waiting in a spreadsheet. "We cataloged the things we found. Most of it was trash. Some of it was time capsules from whoever thought the 70s needed to come back. A few oddities went into a display case." "A display case?" Maya said. "In a hallway, between the photographs of when this place felt different. Found objects of the library era. Some intern's idea to make dust look curated." The case was a rectangle of glass filled with small absolutions. Inside, a library card with a child's precise signature, a pencil stub of bite marks, a photo booth strip of 2 teenagers pretending not to be in love, a pin shaped like an open book, a tin soldier missing an arm, a metal tin with scratches along the lid, just like the ones you get when you pry it with a coin. Her breath shortened. She leaned in. The description on the tiny card read, "Tin found beneath back stair, containing cassette tape, donor anonymous, date of discovery unknown." The tin was there. The cassette was not in it. The lid lay slightly ajar. Dust had collected in the hollow where a valuable small thing used to sit. Maya felt the old tendency toward fairness push up through her ribs. It had been found. It had been emptied. It had been displayed like a guess. She went back to the office. "We don't keep personal contents in the display," the manager admitted. "Not defensive, just practical. We logged everything that looked like it might be sensitive and turned it over to the city archive. I think a volunteer from the Postal Museum picked up some of the materials that had mailroom or communications relevance. There was a cluster of cassettes and microcassettes. Some of them were answering machine tapes. Our intern looked haunted for a week." "Do you have the contact?" He typed with 2 fingers until he found an address and a name. Lydia M., Friends of the Postal Museum. A phone number that kept the formal spacing of another decade sat beneath it. "Thank you," Maya said, her voice quieter than she planned, "for making dust curated." "Sure," he said, as if they'd just finished a fair trade.
The Friends of the Postal Museum shared space with a community theater troupe and a ballroom dancing class. The hallway smelled like old paper and new perfume. The office had posters of sorting machines and stamps the size of windows. A woman with gray hair pinned like a careful thought stood behind a counter arranging postcards into neat rows. "I'm looking for Lydia," Maya said. "You found her," the woman said. "And you are?" "Maya, I was told you might have received some items from the old library renovation. Cassettes, a tin." Lydia looked up, and something like interest broke the surface of her face. "You're not the first person who has come in here looking for something that slipped between years," she said. "Come in. We are professional finders of things that take the scenic route." Maya followed her into a back room. A metal cabinet lined with shallow drawers dominated the wall. Each drawer had a label written in a deliberate hand. "We got a batch of tapes from the library when they dismantled the back steps. Mice had enjoyed some of them. Others were intact. The young volunteer cried over one from a child to a mother who never picked up. I cried over a hummingbird that got into the sorting plant in 1986 and refused to leave," she added, which made no sense and perfect sense. "What I'm actually looking for is a tape that might have been in a tin under a stair. It belonged to someone who signed their letter with an initial and a leaf." "A ginkgo?" Lydia asked, not guessing so much as remembering. Maya's hands found each other. "Yes. We kept one," Lydia said, "pressed in an envelope taped to an index card because the leaf kept trying to escape cataloging." She pulled a drawer. Each little packet had a story written on it in pencil. She found one that said, "Tin under library stair. Cassette to be evaluated. Leaf saved. Donor. Anonymous construction." "There was a tape," Lydia said. "We couldn't listen to it at the time. We sent the audio to a friend with a repaired deck and waited for a clean transfer. Then COVID came. We closed. We opened. The friend retired. We reopened. The friend unretired. The city moved the storage. We moved the labels. The labels stayed where the city had been. You know how this goes. But the inventory says it came back." She opened another drawer. Inside, wrapped in foam, lay a cassette in a clear shell with a handwritten label. The ink had faded. The handwriting was familiar in its concentrated care. "For M, in case voice fails me." Lydia set it down gently, as if the table needed to feel trusted. "We can't let items leave without a process," she said, apologetic. "But we can listen here, if you like." Maya swallowed. "Yes," she said. "Please." The listening room was a small space with posters of radios and a turntable that had been repaired so often it learned to be grateful. An old cassette deck, brushed metal with a single good eye,
sat on a table that obviously had supported more than its share of soft weeping. Lydia pressed play. The tape hissed like rain remembering. Then a man's breath, a throat being cleared to become a beginning. "Hi, Mouse," the voice said. Maya closed her eyes. The years didn't recede, they layered. He sounded younger than memory, and older in the way he overcorrected imperfections. He spoke like a person who had practiced honesty in the mirror. "If you're hearing this, it means the letter made it. Or it means we failed at Tuesday. Either way, I owe you a version of what happened that doesn't insult you. I talked about small things first. The ginkgo leaves that always got into his shoes, the way the library smelled like pencil shavings and promise, the day they chipped the stone and ran, because running is what children do when guilt is in love with joy." He didn't use the word daughter. He didn't need to. "I stumbled into something I wasn't supposed to see, a set of signatures that didn't belong on the papers they were on, money flowing where pipes were supposed to be. I was supposed to fix a meter. I read a ledger instead. I told the person I trusted the most, the one who had offered to teach me the difference between what's legal and what's right. That person told the wrong person. Suddenly, I was the man who was going to ruin Tuesday for everyone." He exhaled. The tape caught the sound and held it like a coin holds a thumbprint. "I did something I'm not proud of. I left. Not you, Mouse. I left the day where I could be held responsible for being brave out loud. I told myself that letters could do the holding until then. That's the bad thing. The good thing, I think the good thing is this. I didn't sign the false papers. I kept copies of the real ones. I left them with someone who knew how to hide an honest truth in a place where it would feel at home. If you need to know, find the painting of the orange clock. You'll know it when you see it. Ask for the reverse." He paused. On the tape, the room creaked as if it had shifted its knee. "If you never forgive me, fine. If you forgive me quickly, be suspicious of yourself. If you think I abandoned you, remember that abandoning anyone is easy, and this felt like swallowing a box of nails every night. I wanted to be better than the day I left. That is not the same as being better. I am sorry." He laughed, a small laugh that walked out to meet her and decided to stop halfway. "I'll be at the clock until Tuesday, but even if I'm not there, I am at every Tuesday that has us in it. Leave me there if you have to. Stay there with me if you can." There was a small clunk at the end, a sound she recognized as someone being done talking before language was ready to admit it. The tape clicked. Lydia stopped it with a fingertip. Maya realized her hand was over her mouth. She took it away and put both hands on her knees like a person about to stand up from a very long sit. "Do you want some water?" Lydia asked, soft, as if the room shouldn't be startled. "Yes," Maya said. "And the painting." "The orange clock?" Lydia asked, head tilted. "You know it. We had a tour once with objects from places that don't exist anymore. There was a small art collective in the old market that used to paint scenes of the city before the city knew it was going to be famous. One of the paintings that passed through here showed a clock in a train hall that isn't a clock anymore. The back of the frame had a compartment. The artist hid love letters there as a protest against forgetfulness." "The reverse," Maya said. "He said to ask for the reverse." Lydia nodded herself, as if matching a bead to a thread. "I'll make a call," she said. The market hall still had its iron ribs and skylights that let in the personality of the day. The stalls were more expensive now. The bread was sold with words like heritage and wild and grain arranged to sound like a genealogy. On one wall, past jars of pickles that looked like they were posing for their portrait, a gallery had nested into an old ticket office. On the wall was a painting of a clock, the color of ripe fruit. The face had no numbers, only smudges where the numbers had been. The hands pointed to a minute between now and not yet. Beneath the clock, the hall had been painted with a patience that respected chaos. Tiny figures moved across the floor like notes in a song that knows it will be hummed for decades. The painting was not large. It was exact. A woman in a linen shirt with paint on the sleeve looked up as Maya entered. "You're Lydia's friend," she said. "She called to say a story might arrive. I like days when that sentence makes sense." I was told the reverse of this painting might have something tucked into it, a compartment. The woman smiled slowly, the way a person smiles when their faith is rewarded with a physical object. "We call it the second room," she said. "People used to hide their better words where no one would think to unhang a painting. We keep this one mounted with screws that know how to forgive." She lifted the painting with careful strength and laid it on a table covered with cloth that had known oil and forgiveness as well. On the back, a small panel had been cut into the frame and screwed in place long ago. The woman turned the screws steady, almost ceremonious. Inside the hidden space was a stack of papers wrapped in brown craft paper and tied with twine. On the bundle, in that same focused handwriting, "For M, or for the future, whoever gets here first." Maya drew a breath that started somewhere in a year without smartphones. The gallery woman stepped back, a priest at the moment of private communion. Maya undid the twine. Inside were copies of forms with official seals and signatures in 2 different inks. There were sheets where a figure had been corrected in the margin and initialed, and other sheets where the figure had been replaced entirely and initialed with a letter that did not match the rest. A short note lay on top. "This is what I stumbled over. If you look at the water usage, the numbers are the same for buildings that should drink differently. If you look at the service calls, the addresses repeat where the pipes do not. Someone is billing for water the city never drank. The money shows up as equipment, and then becomes a salary, and then becomes a vacation house, and then becomes a gift to a campaign that promises to fix the water. I thought telling one honest person would fix this. One honest person thought telling one powerful person would fix me. If I'm wrong, good. If I'm right, I want you to have the map I followed. You were good at maps. When you were 5, you could find the quickest path to the ice cream truck by sound." Maya spread the papers across the table. The lines and numbers looked like a song she didn't know the tune to. She took pictures of everything with hands that didn't quite shake. "Do you need time?" the gallery woman asked. "I need the rest of my life, but yes, and I need to give this to someone who will read it in a language I don't speak. Journalists still exist. So do honest clerks, and there are people like Lydia who know which box to put a truth in so it doesn't fall through the slats." "Is the artist," Maya began, trailing off, the word alive, not wanting to be the opposite of itself in a gallery. "Gone," the woman said, matter of fact and kind. "But the second room stays. That's the point." Maya gathered the copies back into the twine carefully, as if she were wrapping up her own voice for later. She held the painting with both hands while the woman put the panel back, turned the screws, and restored the face of the clock to the wall. "The minute between now and not yet," Maya said, mostly to herself. "It's always my favorite," the woman said. There was still the matter of Tuesday. Not a date exactly, but the day a person gives themselves to keep a promise manageable. The clock in the market hall pointed to it forever. Maya wanted a place that pointed to it in real time. That place had been a station once, where trains treated the city like a punctuation mark. It had become shops and a small restaurant that sold soup without adjectives. In the hall, a replica of the old orange clock hung as a friendly ghost. She stood under it. People passed by with bags that said "mindful" and "limited edition." A busker out of frame played a tune that knew its audience. Maya looked at the bench beside the pillar because it was the kind of thing a person does when they don't know what else to do. On the bench, worn into the wood, were letters carved with a pocket knife by someone whose feelings outran their tools. R+M Tuesday. She reached out and traced the letters with a fingertip. She did not cry. She felt like a lake that is chosen on a windless day to keep its face smooth while holding storms at the bottom. "Good spot," said a voice beside her. It was Theo, the mail carrier, in civilian clothes, recognizable by the way he noticed things. "I deliver here sometimes. I saw you put your shoes on in your hallway," he added, as if making it clear he didn't exactly stalk, he just used his job to see the city in focus. "You saw me at my mail slot," she said, amused by herself. "I didn't mean to be weird. It's just you had a look like someone who was holding something hot and deciding whether to keep holding it." It was a letter that had been in a wall for 2 decades. My father wrote it. The word came out without her permission. It surprised her by not needing apology. "That tracks," Theo said, with the practical sympathy of someone who had delivered wedding invitations to divorced people and jury summons to poets. "My uncle worked at Station L when it was still a place. He told us about a bag they found during a renovation. The bag had a nest inside it, a real bird's nest built of shredded mail. He said they cried over a nest the way other people cry over a ring." Lydia told me about a hummingbird. "She has stories for every machine. They used to call one of the sorters the whale. It swallowed things and occasionally decided to return them like a good host returns a coat." He shifted, looking at the bench. "Are you waiting for someone?" "I think I'm waiting for Tuesday to be over," she said. "He said he'd wait until Tuesday, and then he didn't say what happens after." She smiled, small. "The letter told me not to look, so I looked." "Of course you did," Theo said, as if the world would less be itself if she hadn't. "If you ever want to know what bracket that station code belongs to, I can ask Uncle Nick. Retired people love validation disguised as questions." "I might," she said. "Thank you." They stood under the orange clock for a minute that knew its role. After a while, Theo lifted a hand in goodbye and disappeared into the current of people. Maya stayed. The minute hand trembled, but didn't click forward. That was a trick of light, or faith. She walked home the long way, carrying Tuesday like a book with the last page missing.
Maya scanned the documents, labeled them in folders that made sense to a future version of herself, and sent a careful email to a journalist whose work she had read when she needed proof that stories still mattered. The journalist's out-of-office reply said, "I am in. Mostly. Send anyway." She also printed copies and took them to a clerk at the city office, because Lydia had said, honest clerks still exist, and they filed the important things where the important things can't be unfiled. The clerk was a woman with a practical scarf and a face that looked like it had been told the truth enough to recognize it. She said she would escalate, which may or may not have been a promise, but felt like the right word at the right moment. The journalist called her the next afternoon, breathless the way a person is when they ran to catch a moving thing and, having caught it, must now hold on without making the thing drop. "I need you to understand that I can't promise you anything, except that I'll try to untangle this without getting either of us sued," the journalist said. "And I need to ask, why you? Why now?" "Because a letter arrived that was mailed the year after my handwriting learned math," Maya said. "Because my father died when I was a teenager, and I don't want the last true thing about him to be the worst thing. Because someone wrote Tuesday on a clock, and I want to stop waiting under it." "Okay," the journalist said, as if that linked up with a map they kept in their head. "Do you want to be named?" "Not yet. Not if the story can walk on its own legs." "We can give it a cane," the journalist joked softly. "We'll call when the cane learns to run." That night, Maya slept the way a person sleeps after carrying a backpack full of rocks and then putting the backpack down where thieves don't tend to go. In the morning, she woke with the sense of a task paused, not complete, which is how most important things live in the world. Reading a book. Maya returned to the museum to thank Lydia. The older woman looked like she had been waiting, not impatiently, just in the way a person waits on a porch when they expect good company. "Did you hear it?" Lydia asked. "The tape?" "I heard him," Maya said.
It was easier than she thought it would be to speak about him with someone who had only known him as a label on a case. He hid the rest of it in a painting. "The second room," Lydia said, approving. "Men used to hide their feelings in glove compartments or boats. Artists hide them in the backs of paintings. The paintings don't sink." "Did you ever get a letter late?" Maya asked. Lydia smiled a little. "Once we opened a canvas bag that had been stuck in the side of a sorting machine since what we used to call before. Inside were 5 birthday cards addressed to a child who must have grown up thinking no one remembered they were born. We sent them anyway. The replies we got were not angry, just strange. People cried over the wrong cake and then laughed and then wrote us thank you notes for delivering the past." "What about yours? Your hummingbird?" "Oh, that," Lydia said, eyes alight. "It flew in, tasted the chaos, and refused to leave. We cut the power to the machine and opened doors, and it still preferred the sound of mail. We finally lured it out with a red ribbon and someone humming tunelessly. We saved nothing of mail that day and everything of faith." She picked up a small pin from a tray, a tiny metal arrow, the kind sorters use to push envelopes down the right lane, and pressed it into Maya's palm. "For the second room in your pocket," she said, "in case you need to point a small thing the right way." Maya closed her fingers around it. "Thank you," she said, "for knowing which box to put a truth in." "We don't know," Lydia said gently. "We guess well and keep making better guesses." The journalist called 4 days later. "Your cane is jogging," she said. "The numbers are what your father said they were. The wrong initials signed the right figures, again and again. Some of the people involved have retired. Some have careers that would be embarrassed to be associated with water. The sums aren't huge, no yachts, but they pile up into something with weight. The city says it is looking into it. 2 sources off the record use the word uncomfortable in both senses." "Will it fix anything?" Maya asked. "It will fix our sense that it was ignored," the journalist said. "It will prompt audits and memos. The pipes won't come back. The money won't knock and say it was homesick. But we're not in the business of replacing water. We're in the business of replacing silence." She paused, because good reporters learn when silence is a tool too. "Do you want to say anything for the piece?" she asked. "Say that the letter took the scenic route," Maya said. "Say that a man who was brave late is still brave." After she hung up, Maya sat with the window open and listened to cars pronounce their plans in the street. She took the ginkgo leaf from the envelope and held it up to the light. The veins made a map no one would ever pave. Reading a book. Theo knocked on her door with the fanfare of someone who brings news disguised as gossip. "Uncle Nick says Station L had a sorter named the Whale because it swallowed things and belched them out 3 pay periods later," he said. "He also says he remembers a bag that got stuck behind a panel during a storm. They boarded up the section and forgot it because the power company lost the argument with the sky that week. When they reopened, a contractor found the bag and called it a miracle. Uncle Nick called it Tuesday." "Lydia called that Hummingbird Tuesday," Maya said. "You're all in a conspiracy to make me forgive an inanimate concept." "We are," Theo said. "Also, my uncle wants to give you a box of stamps from the era of your envelope because he thinks people should have physical proof of the way time used to feel." They met Uncle Nick at a diner that insisted on calling itself a lunch counter. He wore a cap with a logo from a postal union that had become a t-shirt for a band and wore his keys like a retired sheriff of hallways. "You're the girl with the letter," he said, delighted to meet a story that had been squinting at him from across a room. "We found those bags when the contractors turned the machine into a fitness center. I took one of the envelopes home, the oldest, because it felt wrong to throw it back in with the herd. This was before I realized none of it was ours to keep. I brought it back the next day. I didn't sleep, took it in like a man returns a dog he shouldn't have adopted. Still think about it." "How did the letter get to me?" Maya asked. "There were no addresses, just my name and a city and hope." "The dead letter office is full of hope. Hope is heavier than you think. Sometimes somebody finally reads the return address and tries again. Sometimes a new scanner sees something an old scanner missed. Sometimes, if you're lucky, a woman in a cardigan looks at a handwriting sample and says, "I've seen this hand before, and it belongs at this street," and she's right, because she's been sorting on the same route longer than the city has had this mayor. "Is that how you do it?" Maya asked, smiling. "Handwriting divination? Is more math than magic, but a little magic helps when the math is tired." He pushed a small box across the table. Inside were stamps that made promises of wonders, birds, bridges, a holiday that wore snow like a scarf. There was also a pin like Lydia's, another small arrow, as if the universe had decided she might forget which direction to mail tomorrow and had decided to double down. "My wife says I give away the house through its windows, but I like when things leave me for good reasons." Maya wanted to tell him that his stamps were a good reason to believe in people she'd never meet. Instead, she said thank you and meant it for more than paper.
Reading a book. Maya went back to the market hall by herself, not to find anything, just to be in a place where a clock stayed orange as a promise. She stood under it and read, on her phone, the piece the journalist had published. It was careful. It was kind to facts. It said her father's name once, in a way that didn't make a meal of him. It said the city would fix what could be fixed, which is the best sentence the city ever learns to say. She sat on the bench with the carved letters and allowed herself a little ceremony. She took the letter from its envelope and read it again, quietly, as if reading to a child who had fallen asleep but still wanted the ending. People walked by and didn't look at her, which was its own mercy. She felt, for the first time, less like a person waiting for Tuesday and more like a person who had decided that Tuesday could be any day she gave a promise to. She took a pen and wrote, on the inside of the envelope, "I read it. I heard you. I am making Tuesdays you can't break." She put the letter back. She put the pin from Lydia and the pin from Nick into the small pocket inside her bag, where coins go to feel useful. She took the ginkgo leaf, kissed it in a way that would have embarrassed her younger self beyond repair, and slid it between the pages of a notebook that held less important shopping lists. When she stood to go, Alma, the woman from the library steps, was in line at the soup counter. She lifted her chin in greeting, curious eyes as bright as they'd been in the alley. Maya walked over and told her the short version. Alma, carefully casual, asked if the bad idea had turned good. "It turned honest," Maya said. "That seems to be the form good chooses when it can't be clean." Alma nodded approval. "You owe me an interesting update," she reminded, pleased, "and a promise to come back and count the steps again someday, so the stones know they were part of a story." "I can do that," Maya said. "I'm getting good at keeping promises that are not to a clock."
The after was not a parade, it was a rearranging. The city announced an audit, a man resigned, a woman was promoted who had a reputation for putting the right figures in the right boxes and sleeping at night because of it. A small editorial ran under a headline that was almost mundane: "Clerks correct course." The comment section tried to make it about something larger. It always does. The truth was small, and therefore most likely to be true. Maya kept the letter in a frame that didn't draw attention to itself. She did not hang it where guests would feel invited to have an opinion about her father. She hung it in the hallway, as if it were the quiet part of a song. Sometimes she stopped and touched the glass, not to be dramatic, just as a way to greet her own past with a nod. She bought a cassette player at a thrift store and learned how to keep it alive. She copied the tape to the cloud because some truths deserve redundancy. Once a month, she listened to it all the way through without doing dishes. She let it be what it was, a man making language do the hard part of love. Theo appeared in her lobby once or twice with stamps or stories or an excuse to share a bench. He did not offer explanations for his timing. She did not ask for any. Sometimes it is enough that people arrive with an outdoor temperature you can stand. Lydia invited her to a found letters night at the museum where people read things that had waited longer than most relationships. One letter had been mailed to an army unit that didn't exist anymore. It had taken the long way across 3 names before landing on a kitchen table that could still hold it. A man read aloud from his grandmother's apology about a song she made him sing when he was small and shy. Each letter had a sound you could hear even if the words were not yours. The gallery woman hosted a short talk about the second room. She told people how to hide love on a wooden back where nails guarded. She showed them how to mount a painting so that it respects both walls and secrets. She did not ask anyone what they intended to hide. She didn't need to. Maya learned that she did not have to forgive quickly to forgive well. She learned that love is less a warm feeling than a repeated decision to stay in a room with a window, even when the view is inconvenient. She learned that time, like the post, often promises more than it can deliver, but sometimes delivers more than it promised. Months later, on a gray day that felt kind in its restraint, Maya mailed an envelope to herself. She used one of Nick's stamps with the bird that looked like it had invented speed. Inside, she put a copy of the letter, a printout of the article, a photo of the orange clock, a ginkgo leaf she had picked up in the alley behind the library and pressed properly, an index card on which she wrote, "For the next version of me, proof that even late arrivals count. If this walks the scenic route again, good. It will learn a story I already know." She dropped it in a mailbox that had been repainted so often it did not remember its first color. Then she went to the market hall, bought soup with no adjectives, and sat under the clock. A child lay on the bench and traced the carved letters with a pencil, not hard enough to hurt anything, just enough to remember. A couple argued gently about whether cilantro tastes like soap. A busker sang a song about a town that shared a name with too many other towns. It was all gloriously unimportant, in exactly the way important days need the world to be. Maya took out her phone and recorded 30 seconds of the clock. She narrated quietly, for herself and for whatever listener, years from now, might need a voice to escort them. "Hello, whoever you are. This is a minute between now and not yet. This is a clock that doesn't make anyone be on time, but makes people want to be brave in public. This is a woman who got a letter late and decided to be on time for herself. This is Tuesday, even if the calendar insists otherwise." She sent the clip to no one. She saved it with a name that would make sense when she had forgotten the details. Tuesday, kept. On the way home, she stopped at the library that wasn't, counted 7 stones, and touched the chip on the 8th. She didn't look under it. She didn't need to. She stood there with her hand on a scratch she had made on a day when everything felt larger, and realized it still was. She laughed, softly, and the sound surprised her with how easy it sounded. When she reached her building, Theo was in the lobby carefully struggling with a package that insisted it didn't fit the slot. "Do you ever feel like the world is a letter we keep trying to get into the right mailbox?" he said, lightly. "All the time," she said. "The secret is backing up and trying the angle you learned before you learned better." He grinned and let the package go, and it slid into the box as if it had been waiting for that exact idea. "Soup?" he asked. "Soup," she said. They walked out into a day that was not brave and did not need to be. The envelope she had mailed to herself would arrive, late or not, with a postmark that would not change the content. She had made space for it. She had learned the room behind the frame. She had kept Tuesday. And somewhere, in a quiet drawer, a cassette rested after doing its job, a little plastic box that had carried a voice across 2 decades and lost nothing essential on the way.
Reading a book. If you ask her later what this story was about, Maya will say, "It was about a piece of paper that wandered and the people who refused to let it get lost. It was about a man who was late to his own courage and a woman who was on time for hers.
It was about the orange clock and the second room and the kindness of honest clerks. It was about Tuesday. It was about mail and maps and the leaf of a tree that remembers both. If you ask her why she tells it aloud, she will say, because letters sound different when you say them where other people can hear. Because someone might be waiting under a clock for a person who isn't coming, and they deserve to know what to do next. Because the scenic route is a route. Because she got her letter, and now she is answering.